Like a sleeping giant, Mount Shasta dominates the southern Cascade Range of Northern California. It dwarfs everything in sight, including the iron horses that have traversed its flanks for the past 130 years. Carved out of the base of the volcano, this highway paved with steel has been and continues to be a vital link between the Pacific Northwest and California. It guides trains through some of the most beautiful country in the U.S. From Redding, California in the south to Klamath Falls, Oregon in the north, the main line crosses impressive bridges, bores through several tunnels, curves inside deep canyons, and stretches across lonely desert valleys. In a follow-up to our 2007 release, The Shasta Route, we return to one of our favorite locations to view today's Union Pacific in action. There's nothing like the show of modern high-horsepower diesels tackling a 2.2% mountain grade on a hot summer afternoon. Or racing through a frozen desert on a chilly winter morning. Shot with broadcast quality high definition and 4K equipment, this is truly a stunning picture of trains traveling through the shadow of Mount Shasta. Today's tour of the former Southern Pacific's Shasta Route will begin in Redding, California, and travel north to Klamath Falls, Oregon, a distance of roughly 172 miles and an elevation change of over 4,000 feet. The section between Redding and Dunsmuir is part of Union Pacific's Valley Subdivision. Trains climb out of California's Central Valley on a fairly easy grade through Silverthorne, Central Valley, Gray Rocks, and over Lake Shasta via the 500-foot-tall Pitt River Bridge. A series of tunnels and bridges take the railroad through O'Brien and Lakehead, where it follows the Sacramento River through Delta, Lamoine, Gibson, Sims, Conant, and Castle Crag before arriving at the crew change point at Dunsmuir. Continuing north, trains enter the Black Butte subdivision, which begins with a stiff 2.2% climb out of the upper Sacramento River Canyon that features a couple of horseshoe curves. The first is Cantara Loop on a bridge over the Sacramento River. The second is Sawmill Curve just below South Mott. From here to North Azalia, the line is double-tracked for a distance of 2.6 miles. The grade lessens as trains travel through the city of Mount Shasta, Upton, and Black Butte, where the newly reopened Siskiyou line continues north to Eugene, Oregon, on the west side of the Cascades, meeting the UP again at Springfield Junction. The Black Butte subdivision continues to climb around the base of Mount Shasta, passing lava flows near Hotlum and Andesite, and reaching the summit at Grass Lake. The long grade is over, and trains enjoy an easy descent through the Klamath National Forest at Panoyer and Kegg, then enter Butte Valley at Mount Hebron. From here, it is mostly level running through Dorris, before crossing the state line. The last 18.8 miles are in the state of Oregon, as we continue through Worden and Texum, which is at the south end of Klamath Falls Yard. It's just after 5 a.m. at 1620 Yuba Street in Redding, California, the address of Redding Station, a depot built in 1923 by the Southern Pacific. Today, it serves the UP and Amtrak's Coast Starlight. This is also a maintenance of way base for the Union Pacific, and the Redding Local works out of here. Power for another local known as the Redding Turn has spent the night at the depot, and as the sun rises, it begins working south on the main track to Roseville. On the far track, a crew for the Redding local prepares for a day's work. The two end units of the approaching Redding Turn are rebuilt EMD SD60Ms, classified as SD59MXs. Set up near the Amtrak platform, power for the Redding local rests on the far track as the southbound ZBRLC heads through town. Originating in Portland, Oregon and bound for Los Angeles, this train usually consists of a mixture of double-stack containers and trailers. In 1872, the Southern Pacific picked this location to run its main line. The land agent for the railroad who made the decision was Benjamin B. Redding. 5 years later, the city of Redding was incorporated with a population of 600. Today, it is nearly 90,000. A turkey vulture enjoys a lofty perch on the impressive Redding Trestle, which stretches 4,346 feet over the Sacramento River. Completed in 1939 as part of the Shasta Dam project, it remains one of the major landmarks in town. The Redding local, led by UP 1096, heads south over the bridge after picking up cars at Central Valley and Gray Rocks. The lone GP40's dynamic brake fan whines as the train eases down the 0.8% descending grade. The local slows to a stop as it nears the north switch at Redding. From the bank of the Sacramento River, we get a nice view of the 77-year-old trestle in the late afternoon. In between passing trains, Canada geese can be found enjoying the calm section of the river known as Lake Redding. This couple even have their youngsters out for an evening swim. Soon, the rumble of big GEs is heard as a northbound manifest soars 110 feet over the water. The Lake Redding Dam and fish ladder are located just downstream from the trestle and are easily seen from Coldwell Park. This water-level view gives us another perspective as the Redding local heads north. Note the UP 1096 is running long hood forward for this move. After crossing the Redding Trestle, the track speed increases to 60 for freight and 65 for passengers. Back in 2007, we got a chance to ride with the crew of the Redding Local up to Grey Rocks and back. Northbounds pass through the sidings of Silverthorne and Central Valley on an easy grade that reaches a maximum of only 0.9%. At Grey Rocks, near milepost 270, a spur track leads to the Lehigh coal-fired cement plant serviced by the UP. A short drop down a 6% grade leads to a small yard at the south end of the plant. Loaded coal hoppers can be seen to the left, and several tracks with covered hoppers come into view as we make our way through the yard. An SW1200 switcher lettered JTPX 1235 is parked near the end of track during our visit. The power we were riding was the UP602, a GP38-2, and behind it, a former Cotton Belt GP40, lettered UP1524. Just north of Grey Rocks, the railroad plunges through tunnels 1 and 2 before crossing Shasta Lake on the Pitt River Bridge. Formed in 1948 after the completion of the Shasta Dam, Shasta Lake is filled by the Sacramento, Pitt, and McCloud rivers, as well as several smaller tributaries. With 365 miles of shoreline and a maximum depth of 517 feet, Shasta Lake is the largest man-made lake in California. Besides providing electricity and irrigation, Shasta Lake is a recreation destination. Houseboats are popular on the lake, and several are available for rent. Today, there seems to be something lurking in the water between Bridge Bay and Beaver Island. Training our camera with the long lens on the object, it appears to be, and yes it is, a shark boat. And it looks like it might be kind of fun. Returning our attention to the rails, the Pitt River Bridge spans 3,588 feet across Shasta Lake and was completed in 1942. Officially named the Veterans of Foreign Wars Memorial Bridge, the 500-foot-high structure carries I-5 on its upper deck and the railroad on its lower deck. At track level, we can see Tunnel 2 at the south end of the bridge. At the north end, the upper deck curves off to the right with the interstate, while the railroad grade continues to the left toward Tunnel 3. On a clear sunny morning, a southbound manifest heads out across Shasta Lake. After crossing the Pitt River Bridge, trains enter a series of tunnels as the track continues on toward O'Brien. Set up at the north portal of Tunnel 3, the southbound lanes of I-5 can be seen on a bridge high overhead. UP 2539 North blasts out of the 1,864-foot bore. The train continues through tunnels 4 and 5. Here is another angle of Tunnel 3, framed through the 856-foot bore of Tunnel 4. The grade remains light through O'Brien, but track speed is reduced to 40 for freight and 50 for passengers here. UP 8231 North is on the heels of the manifest as it exits Tunnel 4 and disappears into Tunnel 5. Just past milepost 280 at Tunnel 9, trains cross the trestle over the Salt Creek inlet of Shasta Lake. The old highway bridge over Salt Creek passes below the trestle and is now underwater, but can be seen during the drought years. The southbound ZBRLC crosses Salt Creek in the mid-afternoon. Continuing our northward journey along the valley sub, we again see Shasta Lake near the Sugarloaf Marina. Traveling down the Sacramento Arm near Lakehead, a houseboat ducks under the railroad near milepost 282 on a nice warm afternoon in early May. A houseboat is basically an RV on pontoons, with all the amenities you need to enjoy a leisurely cruise along the lake. Our peaceful scene is interrupted as a daily southbound Z train crosses the bridge. During much of our filming in the spring of 2016, a work window was in place south of Redding until the late afternoon. Southbound trains were usually held at Dunsmuir and then released in intervals of 1 to 2 hours apart. This Z arrived in Dunsmuir just after daybreak and was held until 2 p.m. Being the highest priority, it was released first and would meet its northbound counterpart just south of Redding. UP 7927 North leads a manifest through Lakehead on a cloudy afternoon. Lakehead is an 8,300-foot siding which marks the halfway point between Los Angeles and Seattle. It is also part of the 30-mile line relocation between Redding and Delta when the Shasta Dam was built. A steady rain falls and puddles form along the remaining north leg of a Y track that was once used for turning helpers on the Southern Pacific. The rest of the Y was torn out by the SP decades ago. Lakehead is used to make meets and as a staging area for maintenance of way. A shiny new signal bridge has been erected at the North Switch, and we are in time to catch UP 2614 South as it drags a 97-car manifest through Lakehead. Trains join the original line again near Delta and continue on a course that follows the Sacramento River to a point just above Dunsmuir. This is the 5,570-foot siding known as Lamoine, and we are set up near milepost 300 as UP 7927 North is again seen pulling its train through one of many curves along the river. Pink spring flowers brighten the scene as we move closer to the water's edge. This part of the upper Sacramento River Canyon is known as Pollard Gulch, and the railroad crosses the river on a through truss bridge at milepost 302.25, which is also the name of the bridge. A heavy manifest with loads of lumber from the Pacific Northwest heads south over the bridge. The older style through truss bridge was built in 1908 and stands in contrast to the girder deck bridges we saw along the newer alignment between Redding and Lamoine. There are several bridges just like this in the upper Sacramento River Canyon. About an hour later, a southbound 99-car grain train passes through. Both the railroad and the river cut through the Shasta Trinity National Forest, which covers more than 2.2 million acres of Northern California. At Gibson, a southbound 73-car manifest heads down grade, led by two fairly new GE Tier 4s and an EMD SD70 Ace. Another remote-controlled Tier 4, UP2660, adds dynamic braking to the rear of the train. Just above Gibson, a northbound Z LCBR crosses the river on another through truss bridge near milepost 306.75. A small water tower stands at Sims near milepost 309.5, as well as a spur track used occasionally by maintenance of way. UP 2621 South heads down grade on its way to Roseville. Sims gets its name from Sims Flat, which was a location of a small sawmill that operated in the early 1900s. A small community grew with the mill known as Hazel Creek, both of which have faded into history. Today, Sims is another 8,300-foot siding used for making meats. UP 2576 North takes the evening ZLCBR through Sims on the main track. Between the sidings of Connaught and Castle Crag, the railroad crosses Indian Creek at a place known as Castella. UP 2621 South leads train QPWRV over the bridge at milepost 315.8. This is a popular location for photographing trains, with Castle Crags in the background. On a clear morning, We hop to the other side of the bridge for this shot of UP 2530 South as the train drifts in and out of the morning shadows. Spring in the Shasta Trinity National Forest is vibrant with colors which are everywhere. This afternoon we are at Castle Crag, the last sighting south of Dunsmuir on the Valley Sub. This is another favorite location for shooting southbound trains, with the crags for a backdrop. The Castle Crags rise to over 6,500 feet above sea level and are a local attraction. UP 2663 South heads through the scene just minutes after departing Dunsmuir. At the south end of Dunsmuir Yard near milepost 320, a pair of unique signals with lighted W's stand near a crossing. A holdover from the Southern Pacific era, these are wait signals. Southbound trains departing Dunsmuir cannot see the aspect of the absolute signals that guard the south switch, which is out of sight around a curve. The wait signal allows train crews to know if there is a favorable signal to depart. A solid W means wait here. Don't foul the crossing. A flashing W means you are clear to leave. A southbound oil train has just made a crew change and has a flashing W to depart Dunsmuir on signal indication. As the train departs Dunsmuir, we see a southbound manifest tied down. A fresh crew will arrive in about an hour to take it to Roseville. From the north end of Dunsmuir Yard, we see a string of SD90 43 ACs that are currently being stored here. A downturn in rail traffic often sidelines older power. First introduced by EMD in 1995, with a promise of a 6,000 horsepower prime mover which never proved to be reliable. These 4,300 horsepower units now warm the bench, while GE's Evolution Series diesels dominate the motive power scene on UP's I-5 corridor. UP 7927 North pulls through Dunsmuir Yard on a rainy evening in a meet with the southbound, which is currently changing crews at the depot, just north of here. After making the crew change, UP 2523 South passes on the main track. The UP 2523 South comes to a stop as it waits for a favorable signal to depart Dunsmuir. Meanwhile, the signals for the crossovers at control point CPVP 321 show a diverging clear, meaning the northbound 7927 is now lined to the depot for the crew change. Dunsmuir's roots go back to the Central Pacific Railroad, which completed their line through the upper Sacramento River Canyon in 1887. Originally known as Poverty Flats or Pusher, Dunsmuir was a helper base for assisting heavy trains up the steep grades to the north. Today, the community's railroad heritage is quite evident through its historical downtown district. The mallet sheds are a remnant of the steam era, where locomotives were serviced, and are located just south of the turntable. The turntable was once surrounded by an impressive roundhouse. Unfortunately, it met its demise when diesels replaced steam. It's still neat to see these remaining structures in the 21st century, as modern high-tech diesels pass by. Two Tier 4 GEVOs, UP 2633 and 2599, plus UP 7985, an older Tier 2 GEVO, lead a northbound manifest to the crew change point at the Dunsmuir Depot. This scene is played out several times a day as trains stop to change crews coming from Klamath Falls, Oregon to the north and Roseville, California to the south. A conductor based in Dunsmuir loads his grip aboard the UP 2633, which will be his office for the next 106.4 miles to Klamath Falls. Dunsmuir is the division point between the Valley Sub to the south and the Black Butte Sub to the north. The Amtrak Depot and Museum is located across the tracks from the UP crew offices. Amtrak 11, the southbound Coast Starlight, arrives around 12:30 a.m., while the northbound 14 pays a 5 a.m. visit before climbing around the base of Mt Shasta. With everything ready to go, UP 2633 North departs Dunsmuir and prepares to tackle the 2% grade that begins almost immediately after leaving town. The underbrush is vibrant with the colors of spring near the north switch of Dunsmuir, milepost 322.6. UP 2605 South leads train QPW-RV into town for a crew change. A high-wide detector can be found at milepost 323.2, and we are into the heavy grade that reaches a maximum of 2.2% while climbing out of the canyon. UP 2635 South leads an 80-car QHKRV past the detector as it heads for Dunsmuir. Brake shoes grip the wheels tighter as the train comes to a stop for the crew change. As the train gets underway, watch the motion of the drawbars while these cars are stretched. The rails continue to follow a much smaller Sacramento River into Box Canyon. A southbound crosses Simpson Avenue near Shasta Retreat. The railroad and the Sacramento River meet one last time on a curved bridge at Cantara Loop, milepost 328. 3 GE ES45AH diesels, 2557, 2568, and 2579, a new Tier 4 model, pull a northbound manifest around the tight curve. A light rail commuter car in blue plastic takes a ride around Cantara Loop on a flat. As the train crosses the bridge, it is mostly hidden by a giant structure built by UP to keep cars from falling into the river should they derail here. This was in light of a 1991 Southern Pacific derailment at this location, which had an environmental impact on the area. Looking down on the bridge gives us a better view of the tight curvature as the railroad crosses the Sacramento River in Box Canyon. This is the first of two tight curves the railroad encounters as it quickly gains elevation. Mt Shasta shows itself above the trees, and a southbound is heard approaching Cantara Loop, which looks like a model railroad from our vantage point. A lone DPU applies dynamic braking as the train snakes its way through Box Canyon. It's the middle of May in Northern California's Trinity Mountains, and the warm temperatures often bring out snakes of another kind. We found this rattlesnake crossing the road not far from Cantara Loop and paused for a moment to show him to you. This little guy is about 18 inches from his head to his rattles and is only interested in crossing the road. Although poisonous, rattlesnakes won't bother you if you leave them alone. However, they don't take too kindly to being accidentally stepped on either. Our slithery little friend is a good reminder to always watch your step when rail fanning in snake country. Working our way up the middle section, we are now halfway in between Cantara Loop and Sawmill Curve. The grade below us is about 5 rail miles to the south, between the loop and the former siding of Small. A northbound ZLCBR thunders up the canyon. Several minutes later, the train approaches our location just down from milepost 330. Milepost 330 marks a derailment from years gone by. A grain hopper and boxcar are visible just below the grade, which has been reinforced with concrete as it hugs the tight shelf high above the Sacramento River. Apparently, more than one person has ventured down here and left some inscriptions on the wrecked cars. A second train is working its way up the canyon behind the Z, and we hurry to get set up as UP 2539 North leads a Roseville to Hinkle train up the 2.2% grade. The engineer blows for the crossing at Mott, while the rear of the train wraps around Sawmill Curve, passing one of 3 defect detectors found on the heavy grade above Dunsmuir.
UP detector, milepost 330.3, no defects. Total axles 366. Train speed 20. MPH temperature 73 degrees. Detector out.
A few minutes later, a third northbound led by UP 8422 squeals around Sawmill Curve with an intermodal train. The northern end of Sawmill Curve concludes near South Mott, milepost 331. A young deer crosses the main line in the late afternoon just south of the switch. The new LED signals come to life with a high green for a northbound MRVEU working between Roseville and Eugene, Oregon. The string of gondolas passing the camera will be set out at Black Butte for the Central Oregon and Pacific Railroad and sent up the Siskiyou Line. The former Southern Pacific Main Line has recently been rehabilitated and the section over Siskiyou Summit reopened. These cars will be loaded with old railroad ties that have been replaced. UP 2557 South passes the signals at milepost 332.45. If there is a lot of traffic in the canyon above Dunsmuir, southbound trains are often held here to avoid fouling the Mott Road crossing. North Azalia marks the end of double track at milepost 333.6. The grade begins to lessen to an easier 1.4% as UP 2596 leads train ZLCBR toward Mt Shasta on a rainy evening. A Roseville to Hinkle train climbs the grade at Pioneer on a warm, sunny morning. Mt Shasta is located at milepost 336.5 on the Black Butte Sub and features a small yard once used by the McLeod River Railroad until its demise in 2009. The large cinder cone known as Black Butte rises in the background as the southbound ZBRLC glides down the 1.6% grade here. The train continues down the grade, passing a spot where passengers once boarded the McLeod River Railroad for a quick excursion to Big Canyon and back. Standing nearly in the same spot 14 years earlier, we caught the McLeod number 18, leading one such excursion out of Mt Shasta. Returning to 2016, A spring storm has highlighted some of the mountains with a little taste of winter. Even Black Butte shows off its lighter side, while a green signal calls UP 7927 north through town. We continue up the hill through Upton and arrive at Black Butte, namesake for the subdivision. A water tank remains from the steam era and is still used for supplying water for trucks and tenders during fire season. Moving across the tracks, a courteous UP Maintenance Avoy employee has stopped short of the grade crossing to give us a clear view of a southbound oil train passing the tank. Thank you, sir. Black Butte is where the former Southern Pacific's Siskiyou line joins the busy I-5 corridor. In late 2015, the route over Siskiyou Summit between Weed, California and Medford, Oregon was reopened after a hiatus of nearly a decade. Two GP38-2s wearing Genesee and Wyoming colors and sporting Corp lettering for the Central Oregon and Pacific Railroad bring a cut of cars to be interchanged with the UP. The crew get permission from UP Dispatcher 66 in Omaha and back down the siding to the house track. These cars are hauling used ties left over from the recent renovation and are similar to what we pointed out earlier on the MRVEU. With the job done, the light power returns to Weed. This crew is by no means done for the day. They have another train waiting for them to take up to Hornbrook on the Siskiyou line. But we'll save that story for another day. Evening sunlight gleams on the rails leading west to Weed on the Siskiyou line, and Mt Shasta basks in the golden light above Black Butte. We are in the middle of the Y, as the northbound MRVEU is seen again, stopping to set out its cars for Corp. The conductor is on the ground back near the tank as the engineer slowly pulls a train forward in the siding. With the work completed, the MRVEU continues north in the last minutes of daylight. The white summit of Mount McLaughlin marks the horizon at Hotlum, the next sighting to the north of Black Butte. It is named after the Hotlum Glacier, one of 7 named glaciers found on Mt Shasta. If you look carefully, you can see a cantilever signal bridge that for some reason still stands at the north switch. UP 2579 South heads for Dunsmuir on the main track, while a string of bear tables are temporarily stored in the siding. The grade at Hotlum is surprisingly level. This scenic section of the Black Butte subdivision travels right through the shadow of Mt Shasta. Already we have gained some 4,000 feet in elevation since leaving California's Central Valley at Redding. From the west slope of this 14,162-foot stratovolcano, we look across the Shasta Valley, where among the many buttes, the Siskiyou line heads north toward the mountains that bear the same name. From our solitary location, it's hard to believe that we are standing in the most populous state in the U.S. Glancing at our surroundings, the hills, canyons, and ancient lava flows seem to us much the way they must have looked when pioneers first ventured west. The sky brightens over Lake Shastina as a cold breeze flows down from the massive shoulders of the volcano. The western sky turns a deeper red before being snuffed out for the night. Red eyes gleam through the trees, and the rumble of prime movers break the silence. A nighttime Z passes beneath the shadow of Mount Shasta. The train continues into the night, its sound swallowed up by the massive lava flows to the north of the sleeping mountain. A nearly full moon tells us that another day of rail fanning has come to an end. The next morning, mountain wildflowers show off their bold colors near the north end of the Dry Canyon Viaduct, which carries the rails through this rugged, beautiful land. Again, we are momentarily distracted by the natural beauty of the landscape, which comes alive in May and early June. A northbound has just knocked down the signal at the north switch of Hotlum, and it crosses the trestle. After the train passes, we move to another vantage point from which to view the viaduct. A short ZLCBR crosses Dry Canyon, and we show you the train in its entirety. Continuing north between Hotlum and Andesite, the rails pass through a large lava flow which once oozed from the base of Mt Shasta. Today, it is dotted with stunted trees and brush. Let's move down the canyon as we work our way around the base of the mountain and get another perspective of the Dry Canyon Viaduct. Mt Shasta often creates its own weather. This time-lapse shot illustrates how clouds form near the summit and then evaporate as a south wind blows over the mountain. Pulling back, we can see the Dry Canyon Viaduct and a southbound heading down grade toward Hotlum. The blue engine is a GE Tier 4 demonstrator that has found its way onto this manifest. We stayed at this location until sundown and found that the light on the bridge gets much better between 4 p.m. and sunset in the late spring. A pair of EMDs lead a northbound Z train up grade through the scene. The golden hour is once again upon us. Indian paintbrush soak up the red rays of the sun and throw it back at us as a work train creeps across the dry Canyon Viaduct and coasts down to Hotlum. Working our way farther to the north, we are near the sighting known as Andesite, named for the volcanic rock that covers the region. A midnight storm has left its evidence on the lower slopes of the mountain, and the summit is hidden from view this morning. Looking west, storm clouds are bearing down on the Shasta Valley, while drenching the mountains to the west with heavy spring rains. It is an ever-changing scene from our perch, high up in the southern Cascade Mountains. Drawing our attention back to the rails, some maintenance of way equipment is tied down on a spur track just below the 8,342-foot siding. Between here and the summit at Grass Lake, the grade is a fairly easy 1.4% for northbounds. Two ES45AHs, the UP 2628 and 2611, are on the point of an 85-car manifest bound for Roseville. We watch as a train drops down through Andesite. On our early morning visit to the mountain, we are set up between Andesite and the former sighting of Cougar, the 14,162-foot peak of Mt Shasta, and the smaller 12,335-foot satellite cone known as Shastina bask in the first rays of the sun. Mt Shasta is actually made up of 4 overlapping volcanic cones, giving the mountain its unique shape. We detect some movement in the dark foothills, and soon make out Amtrak 14, the northbound Coast Starlight, as it climbs through the lava flows at Andesite. It's 6:20 a.m. As the train approaches, the engineer acknowledges us with a light whistle, being careful not to wake the sleeping passengers at this hour. Fast forward nearly an hour, and the morning sun lights the scene in the fresh, cool mountain air near milepost 364. Glass insulators shine from the nearby telegraph poles, which are quickly fading from much of the railroad landscape. This is a nice location to catch the southbound ZBRLC as the train heads downhill for Dunsmuir. Another favorite location for photographers along the Black Butte Sub is the former sighting of Cougar. UP 2557 North climbs through the scene just 3 miles from the summit at Grass Lake. Another water tower can be found just above the tracks at Grass Lake. Thirsty steam locomotives would take on water here after their long climb up the hill from Black Butte. At 5,056 feet above sea level, Grass Lake is the highest crossing of the Cascade Mountains on this former Southern Pacific main line through California and Oregon. It is around 200 feet higher than Cascade Summit, located 166 miles to the north in Oregon. As you can see, Grass Lake is exactly what the name implies. A Y-track existed here for turning helpers back in the steam days. We are actually standing on the old grade for the Y, where the tail track would have been, as UP 8422 North crests the summit on a warm spring afternoon. It's 7 a.m., just north of the sighting at Grass Lake. Amtrak 14 passes by with 2 private cars on the tail end. After cresting the summit at Grass Lake, the rails drop down a grade of around 1% through Penoyer and Kegg. At milepost 375, about a mile and a half south of Penoyer, the railroad passes through the remnants of a forest fire which closed the line the previous summer. Started by lightning, the tinder-dry forest of lodgepole and ponderosa pine burned over 4,000 acres in the immediate area. On a cool, damp April morning, a headlight appears through the dead timber announcing the arrival of UP 2524 North, with Amtrak 14 right on its tail. Moving trackside, an early running 14 slips through a section of the forest that wasn't touched by the fire. The Black Butte subdivision continues on an easy course through the Klamath National Forest, veering to the east around Mount Hebron and Ore Mountain, before turning north again near Kegg. The backcountry of Northern California includes names like Horse Thief Butte, Antelope Sink, and Dead Steer Flat. The sparsely populated area is home to ranches and old dried-up logging towns. We suspect that the bovine population in these parts most likely exceeds that of people. One such herd is grazing in a lush meadow not far from the main line at Kegg, the location of a red cinder pit used for roads, and an 8,343-foot siding. We see our southbound 99-car oil train one more time as UP 5373 leads the charge around the big sweeping curve near milepost 386. Two additional GEs bark loudly as they apply their muscle to the rear of the 6,200-foot train. It's New Year's Eve 2015. Mount Shasta peaks above a tree-covered ridge over frozen code lines near the south end of Mount Hebron, a 7,286-foot siding. The red over flashing yellow is for a northbound Z train, which will run around a southbound manifest holding the main. The temperature is near zero as UP 8787 approaches. The second unit is a former Southern Pacific AC 4400 and a welcome sight. The passing train knocks ice from the code lines, which were coated by a freezing fog last night, creating an interesting scene. UP 8072 South waits patiently on the main and soon gets a light to depart Mount Hebron for, hopefully, a quick and uneventful New Year's Eve trip to Dunsmuir. If all goes well, they should arrive in just a couple of hours. The rails continue north through Butte Valley to Macdoel and Dorris. The frozen peak of Mount McLaughlin is again seen at first light, just north of Macdoel near milepost 400. A high-pressure system brought clear skies and cold temperatures to the area. Our thermometer read 9 degrees below zero as we shot these scenes on the 31st day of December, 2015. It's amazing how well sound travels through cold air. This southbound ZBRLC was heard approaching long before its lights ever appeared out of the fog between Dorris and Macdoel. Watch the shadow patterns on the frozen code lines as a train approaches. We look upon the frosty sage and rabbit brush as the train curves to the east at Macdoel. The morning sun has brought the temperature up to -7 Fahrenheit, although it is hard to tell the difference when a train is whipping past you at 60 miles per hour. The ZBRLC met a northbound manifest at Mount Hebron, and it soon appears around the curve. The grade is nearly level as trains race through Butte Valley, located just south of the Oregon state line. Normally, we stay away from grade crossing shots as much as possible. However, one doesn't get to hear the sound of real crossing bells much these days, like the pair that can still be heard at Shadydale Lane. Being the 31st day of December, you might say they are ringing in the new year. The sun tries to peek through the fog as we move closer to Dorris. Amtrak 14 briefly appears on its New Year's Eve run to Seattle. Located just 20 miles south of Klamath Falls, Dorris is the last town we will visit in California. Highway 97 cuts right through the heart of the town, passing remnants of a once thriving timber industry and relics of farming. Two giant teepee burners still stand in Dorris. They were used to burn sawdust and wood waste that accumulated in sawmills to help reduce the risk of a fire. Phased out in the 1970s, they were also called wigwams or sawdust burners, and many still stand today. The Dorris Lumber Company's Dorris plant is still open for business and is located right next to the main line at the north end of town. Our I train, led by UP 8422, races past on its way to Klamath Falls. After passing the north switch at Dorris, the train plunges into the 2,076-foot bore of Tunnel 17. On a different day, UP 7941 South exits the tunnel with a 100-car QPW RV. This train is 6,943 feet in length. After exiting the Dorris Tunnel, trains pass through Tunnel 18 and cross into Oregon. The state line is located in a cut bank at milepost 411.16. Oregon's boundary with California and Nevada is determined by the 42nd parallel north, as shown with this marker, which is displayed not far from the tracks. The northbound Coast Starlight crosses the invisible line just minutes from its station stop at Klamath Falls. The first sighting in the state of Oregon is Worden. The sighting itself is a short one at only 4,858 feet in length. But the crown feature here is the Worden Grain Elevator, located along the railroad and Highway 97. A northbound stag train passes the tall structure on its way to Klamath Falls. Just around the bend from Worden, we get another glimpse of Mt Shasta and our northbound ZLCBR on its New Year's Eve run. Amtrak 14 gets permission from dispatcher 66 to enter Klamath Falls Yard.
Amtrak 1466 going down the main track, Klamath Falls Yard. Signal indication, no track breach, over.
Okay, Amtrak 197 North, mainline signal indication, Klamath Falls Yard, our crew change, and no track breach protection at this time, over.
That's correct, sir.
Thank you, dispatcher. Have a good day.
You, sir.
The sound of the train is drowned out by F-15 fighters stationed at nearby Kingsley Air Base. As Amtrak enters the yard, we spot the two F-15s in the sky overhead. Klamath Falls is home to the 173rd Fighter Wing, where F-15 pilots sharpen their skills. This is a Texum Y, which connects the Black Butte sub with the Modoc line. These rails once headed southeast through the remote desert country to tie in with SP's overland route at Flanagan, Nevada. Today, only 107 miles remain. It is June of 2010, and an unusual train is entering the Modoc subdivision. This was the first of several pipe trains that were dispatched to Lakeview, Oregon, as part of a natural gas pipeline that was being built. On a line that had only seen sparse local traffic since 1996, a 6,000-foot-long unit train was something to see. Just north of the Y, we sit up at Kladd and get our first view of the Klamath Falls Yard. A QPDRV is picking up additional cars before heading south to Dunsmuir, and the BNSF White Line local is seen approaching Beaver Line Junction, where it will have to wait to cross the UP yard before doing its work on the west side of the tracks. The BNSF yard is located just to the south of the UP. UP 5540 North enters Klamath Falls Yard with a 99-car empty grain train. As it continues into the yard, UP 7941 South departs Klamath Falls on Texum 17 track with a QPW RV. The UP yard is busy today, and the BNSF White Line local continues to wait at Beaver Line Junction. Moving closer to the UP crew office, we again see the UP 8422 bringing the Seattle-bound stack train into the yard for a crew change. As the train comes to a stop, we see another crew moving power around the yard. From the Amtrak depot, we spot the UP 2002 in its blue paint scheme, commemorating the Winter Olympic Games in Salt Lake City, which took place in the year 2002. It is currently being used for power on a local that is based in Klamath Falls. As we wait for the stack train to depart, we watch the inbound crew of an MRVHK shuffle power around the yard. At one time, 2 different switch jobs worked in Klamath Falls, a task now handled by mainline crews. The engineer gives us a friendly toot as the power passes on track 3. The power heads back to couple to its train and will be departing sometime during the night. In the meantime, our northbound stack train has been recrewed and has permission to depart Klamath Falls Yard for an evening trip over the Cascade subdivision to Eugene. But that's a story for another time. In the meantime, we hope you've enjoyed your tour of the former Southern Pacific Shasta line. A lot has changed since we first toured this area back in 2007, but the tough grades and beautiful scenery still remain. Until next time, thanks for watching.